everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Making a Difference in Mental Health. I'm your host, Danielle.
I'm Wendy.
And we are back with a returning guest from last season. Hey, Leidy Magdalena Mena was with us on last season talking about the discussion on Roe v. Wade. And we have her back to talk a little bit more about women, about trauma, and just, some of the things that have happened over the course of the past year, or maybe some input that you can put into the conversation, right? Into the zeitgeist of conversation. But before we start, our last episode, Wendy
Danielle
was so hoping that her Eagles would win the Super Bowl. And by the time everyone sees this, they'll already know what the score was. They'll already know what the outcome was. I really don't have much input about this, but go ahead, Wendy, take it.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I just want to say how proud I am of the Birds. I am a die-hard Eagles fan, and I was in Philly earlier this week, and you could just feel the sadness and the malaise because we couldn't bring the trophy home. But on the flip side, everybody was still like, you gave us a great season. We love you, It was just a hard loss for us in Philly, and but looking forward to next year.
I guess, Leidy, were you able to watch the game?
Yes, I did. I loved every second of it. I was at the edge of my seat. And I just like to see Mahomes win.
Yeah.
And again, everybody was betting that the Eagles were going to win, and so who doesn't like to beat the odds? I'm so sorry, Wendy. I'm sorry.
People really I know people were saying that we were going to win, but I also heard a lot of commentary about how we were underdogs and how we're going to beat, Patrick Mahomes. My city likes to be. We're a working town, blue collar city, and we like to be the underdogs. We thrive in that, but we just didn't have it. We just didn't have it. But like I said, it was a great season. So I'll recover, Danielle. Thanks for bringing it up.
All I know is that Kelsey, that's his name. I know there were two brothers, Kelsey for one team.
Yes. How beautiful is that, right?
Really cool, but he did say put some respect on our name. Now, again, I don't have any favorite. I saw the halftime show. And so that's really all I can contribute.
But a great topic, I believe, to start with is we're talking about, how new it is that now women are celebrating their path with the universe, to their relationship with the universe, that it trusts us to create and give life.
Yes.
And it's being announced on this platform in bold red colors that we can perform and give life. And I mean, I don't know how she did it, but I mean, we do it. We find a way to do it all. That was beautiful.
Well, you know who else did that? Keke Palmer on Saturday Night Live.
She did.
And that show was excellent. She has such good comedic timing. She's so funny, but she was so, she's like, all the rumors, and then she went, bam! Baby bump. So it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. So yes, look at us. Look at women. So this is, on topic, because today we are discussing women and trauma and how we work with women and all the great things that women do. So let's get it started.
Yeah. So just to remind everyone, because you were here last year, but we may have some new viewers and new subscribers. So can you remind everyone, just kind of reintroduce yourself to everyone?
Okay, so my name's Leidy Magdalena Mena. I am an Afro-Latina originally from Dominican Republic, but a proud Washingtonian since the 90s, before it was gentrified. And I'm actually currently in Dominican Republic, getting to know the mental health care system here just a little bit more, because I do work with immigrant families. And so I like to make sure that I understand both parts of the culture, because as you get older, you lose touch with some of those parts and, the coded language and all of these things, and current events. So, so I've been providing clinical services for the past 15 years to children, couples, individuals, families in the DMV. I also work with nonprofits, taught university level, have supervised graduate students.
Nice.
et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I love what I do. And I think that it's important that we support each other as best as we can in our community.
Absolutely.
Right. So you want to go ahead and start us off with just the conversation that we're going to have today?
Sure. So as I said earlier, we're talking about women in trauma. And, we spent so much time on this podcast last summer talking about the Dobbs decision, what that impact Roe versus Wade being overturned is going to do for women, and how are we going to manage in this new day and age. And so I wanted to come back to that conversation, especially with you, Leidy, because you have a practice and you work with Latinas, and it's really important to see and let our audience know and hear. It was about 8 months ago. How are women faring? In not only in Maryland or the DMV, but in the country, we've heard lots of chatter about just kids getting pregnant and people jumping from state to state, and these laws are getting more and more just crazy, like preventing you from. I heard something the other day on the news about in a state where they want to have the police be able to tap into women's phones to look at their period apps. And if they do something, wrong, or they, don't have a period and then they have a period, that they can do something with them criminally. So it is really getting draconian out here. And so I just want to know, we want to know, our audience wants to know, how's it been for you in your practice? What have women been saying about the Roe versus Wade?
I will say that I have not heard as much as I expected. It is still part of the ongoing conversation here and there. So, for example, I've got clients who have stocked up on Plan B and have these one-on-one conversations with their nieces and nephews and cousins and so forth to let them know that they're here for them. And, I believe in the power of aunties and uncles, right? Because a lot of our nieces and nephews and cousins will come to someone else that's not their parent to get some of that support. So I'm happy to say that both in the Latino and the African American community, I'm just seeing a lot of more conversation between women of different generations, almost to let each other know, that they're there for them, that and that they have options. So that has actually been, it's unfortunate that it has to happen this way, but it is nice to see the way that we can come together in ways that maybe we couldn't previously do so because of all of the stigma behind it. Again, the DMV is a very progressive area, right? And so this is its own little bubble.
But I must say, as in, I'm not quite sure about Virginia, but I'm gonna say definitely, the district in Maryland, we're protected.
Inside that beltway. Inside the beltway, we're good to go.
Inside the beltway, yeah, absolutely.
But I like how you bring up the ability for the different generations to talk, and how, like you said, the power of the aunties and even like the grandmothers, and a lot of times too, my friends, sometimes we talk about, wow, I wish the older generation would have told us X, Y, and Z earlier, for those who are either married or who are having children or whatever process it comes to be when it comes to your rights, as a woman, and when it comes to reproduction, when it comes to children. They wish, and even myself sometimes wish, that the older generation would have told us or disclosed to us certain things, but we also talk about often just the certain generations, like the boomers. There were just things you didn't talk about. You experienced them, and it was kind of like, what happens in this house stays in this house. And I always say, sometimes what happens in the house isn't safe, for people to stay in the house, or the lack of education, or, finding means somewhere else. So I like how you're just, letting us know and giving us updates that, now you're seeing the combined of the older and the new to talk. And you know what, too? Support each other. And the newer generation can also help the older generation understand, hey, this is what's going on now. And hopefully the older generation, there's either no shame or guilt behind, their silence, right? And there's a little bit of empowerment there that they can receive from both, like you said, for support.
That's good.
The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is, this was happening right around that time, it was the idea of relocating. And so there were a lot of women that are now, that are now child-free by choice. And so these folks, they're talking more about how ideally they want to move abroad where their reproductive rights are safe. And should they choose to have a child, and their child is safer from things like police aggression, and things of that nature. Yeah. Well,
right. And that goes like right into our next point of discussion about just the stress on women, and about, in these days and times we're talking about reproductive rights, like, it's such a confusing time, the police brutality, even, things that come with work and marriage, and, all these other things with managing families that can also increase stress. What are some strategies, that you would give your female clients to manage, that stress and anxiety, if any, and how to balance it?
So this is such a good question, and I have the same strategy, and that I give most folks. I just tell them to try to go back to the basics.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and we forget how important that is. I mean, if you think about this evolutionary wise, right? It doesn't make sense that we would be vulnerable to a predator for 8 hours a day unless our bodies really needed that sleep, like really. And so it's tough because society has puts all of this pressure, especially on women, right? For the home to look like this, for the kids to go here, for our work, et cetera, but we cannot underestimate the power of sleep, right? And so are you sleeping?
Every episode, sleep, rest has been a theme.
Huge.
So
I mean, we just did a show just purely on sleep. It's so simple, but yet so complex.
And Dr. Verma talked about sleep, and so that's a theme. That is a theme. But continue.
That's beautiful. But a lot of people want to do more, be more productive. I try to encourage folks to think about how they can do less, and not fall into this trap that everything's got to get done. Again, it's unfortunate that, it's heartbreaking that we had this entire pandemic. Okay.
Yeah.
But it did bring to light that we don't have to do all of the things that you thought you absolutely had to do. We found ways around it when we were in that restrictive space. So what we know is that somewhere in there, we have these strategies, and we just kind of have to pull those out. And then we also talk about just modeling. So nothing motivates a woman more than her children, in my experience, right? Especially for women of color. That's just been my experience. And when I can't get people to do stuff, I just ask them, like, what do you want to model for your children? How do you want them to be when they have children and they're in a relationship? Would you like for them to put cleaning the house first, their spouse first, other people's expectations first? Or do you want for them to take care of their health first and their well-being, and live a full life?
I mean, that's a great way to frame it. And I think I'm with you 100% that what I can give to my child is that what you just said is like, I can be that role model. I want you to be the happiest, the best person that you can be. And you know what? Take care of yourself. So there's going to be times where, you got to be selfish, and that's okay. So I think when you start young and you teach our girls that, it's better in the future. But what were you going to say, Danielle?
I was just kind of reflecting, Leidy, on what you were saying about it's almost like a mother's awareness kind of peaks when you begin to talk about her children. And I'm just kind of recalling back in the days when I used to work in the court system, and we had a specific domestic violence unit. And you would have your screening questions, but it wasn't until many times some of the survivors would say, well, it was fine with me, but then it happened with my kid. That's when I knew I needed to go. Or that's when I knew I needed to change. And so right. I know, and Wendy's 30 plus years in child welfare. This is something that you've heard before.
Right.
And so it's just that getting ahead of it, you know, or like we've been talking about, one generation telling the other, supporting the other so that it doesn't have to, if it does get to the point where, like you say, well, okay, what would you want your kids to experience? How would you want your child to experience you or experience certain situations? And it's almost like the awareness clicks on, and then there's motivation to move, motivation to work, motivation to, shift and change and elevate, to the next level of functionality, right? Of survival, of, daily positive, healthy mental health, emotional health, like all of those living, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kids are powerful. That's all I'm going to say. Absolutely. So, Leidy, as we talk about trauma, what do you see in your practice? Are you seeing women, because there's so much going on in the world today, right? So much negative images on the news, so much negative stories. We're living through gun violence, mass shootings every day. We already touched upon like the police aggression and all that. Are women coming to you because they're, in terms of trauma, struggling with, managing these day-to-day situations and seeing these images? Or are they really kind of being triggered and talking about, things from their past in terms of trauma that they decide, now's the time I need to really work through what's been happening? What have you been seeing?
So I'm so glad you asked this question, because this is really exciting to report just as feet on the ground, right? I used to get a lot of folks come in, women come in because they were triggered by past events, right? But they didn't know it. Mm-hmm. They just knew that they were not presently okay. Maybe they were having bad dreams, or they couldn't get out of bed. It was their current functioning that used to bring them in. And once they could sleep, or once they could, they could kind of keep pushing forward, then they would end the session. And I would often get these strict directives back in the day to not touch their history.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, women are being triggered, but they're understanding now that they're being triggered. There is a collective awareness. There's an increase in our collective awareness of the way that mental health works, the way that our history can impact us. I mean, shows like yours, right, that are accessible, that are with faces that we love and trust, women of experience. And I just think that women are just becoming more and more well-informed about what is happening. And I'm seeing folks being very proactive.
Yes.
That's good.
What I find, and I actually love to use psychoeducation in my sessions, and I've had mainly women, and as a matter of fact, women that are part of maybe Boomer 1, Boomer 2 generation. So, right. So those born, I would say, 1960 or earlier. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Providing them with psychoeducation in their session, they're like, wow, I never connected the past to my present affect or my present behaviors, the past history, the past traumas, the past abuse, or even neglect, mm-hmm. or, even the lack of, there is a affection scarcity where we didn't hug, or we didn't touch, or there were no words of affirmation, all these love language information that we have today. It wasn't there. And so providing them today with that, there's this awakening of awareness, like you've alluded to already, for our older generation.
Right. I think, in our practice here and doing clinical supervision, I talk a lot about connecting the dots for people. So people have an understanding and a better appreciation for, yes, this is happening to me now, and yes, it's maybe connected to something in my past, and hopeful that now I know what it is, and I can, it's hopeful that I know what it is, and I can, work through it. And so I really stress that. I don't like people walking around creating their own narratives in their head about how and why, and they're behaving like this, and people are thinking this, and they're like bad people and all of that. So to what you said, yes, I like that a lot. So well, that's encouraging, Leidy, that your clients are now, having a better understanding of what's happening with them, and understanding the triggers and why, and that's hopeful for us in our practice.
Yeah. Are there any ways when you're exploring that with your clients, does the trauma affect them in a way, or are they symptomatic? Like, let our audience know if perhaps you're not aware, like you said, the awareness might not have been there, but after you've worked with them and educated them, what are some symptoms that maybe some of our women viewers may, want to think about, kind of evaluate themselves from the physical, emotional, and mental space? What are some symptoms that you often see, or, make our audience aware of when it comes to trauma?
So that is a really big question, because, symptoms can show up in so many ways, right? It can just be you feeling tired or low, just a lack of motivation. It could be just avoiding a particular part of town, or people that remind you of someone that hurt you. It could be a low fuse, or a short fuse for certain family members. It could be difficulty sleeping. It shows up in your body. If for those of you out there that want to understand the relationship with your body and your trauma, The Body Keeps the Score is a really great place to start. It's not a light, let's go to sleep kind of book, So maybe we grab a little bit of coffee and drink a little coffee and read it around noon on a Saturday kind of thing. But it just shows up differently for folks. Some people a lot of women are also really great at masking, and they don't even know that they're doing it.
That's a good point. Like, because of, we're women, so we have all that pressure on us to perform and to be okay and to make everything work and to solve every problem. And so I can definitely see masking being right there, where it's like, no, I'm just going to put it out of, my brain, and then then these other things. I like how you describe them, because these are things our viewers and listeners can relate to, because it affects your sleep, it affects your energy, it affects things that are going on somatically.
Yes.
So I think those things are really important to help people really connect and see that maybe something's going on, and I need to go get some help.
And just to kind of touch on it a little bit later on in the month, we actually are going to be exploring that, the strong Black woman trope. So we're going to be exploring that, strong Black woman trope and other tropes of women of color. And one of them is, just kind of masking. That's one of the categories that we're going to be discussing. So, it's so appropriate that we're talking about these things. And I can admit I'm guilty of, either masking, or, maybe it's something that we've been taught, or something that we've been conditioned to do because, of that strength, or sometimes having to wear multiple hats to keep your household running, to keep work running. And
it's like putting your big girl panties on, right? Like, it's like put your big girl panty on and just get through it, and we're trying to kind of break that up, that might not be the way to go.
Right. That goes back to the generational thing too, I think. So again,
absolutely.
We keep coming back and forth to some of the points that you've made about just, putting the two generations together to help support. Maybe our grandmother generation had to be the big girl and put those panties on, right? But then we have our particular generation and clinicians and therapists and counselors who can say, it's okay. You can rest.
Yes.
You can actually rest.
And you can talk to somebody. It's okay. It doesn't make you less than.
Right. It doesn't make you any less strong, any less weak, or anything like that.
Yeah.
And a sisterhood, I think, our chosen village, it's so powerful. And so having other women around you that can support you and kind of check you when you're doing that and say, hey, I know this, I live it, we live it. Let's work on this, hyperdependency issue or hyperindependence issue. I mean, I've made it a culture in my friendship group to call each other out on these things. Um, so I'm just glad that you're bringing that up as well, and that you're going to keep having these conversations.
Yeah, so important. So, Leidy, before we head on out, and we like to end with tips.
Yes.
So, anything you want to share finally with our audience in terms of women being a woman and trauma, and how to go about it, how to get help, any of those kinds of things, how to attack your trauma, or the big buzzword is PTSD. I think opinion wise, side note, I think a lot of people get caught up in names, diagnoses. I'm more interested when I'm working with somebody, like, what are your symptoms? Just tell me that. How are you functioning day to day? Don't worry about what it's called. Let's look at that. So in terms of tips to get, the whole premise of this podcast is to destigmatize getting mental health treatment. And so we want to always end on, these are the things that you can do. This is how we're normalizing it. Things that you think you weren't feeling, we put it in layman terms so you can understand it. You can connect the dots for yourself, and then, get help. It's okay. So what do you have to tell us?
And so, I just want people out there to understand that, yes, we use this language, but it's because we need language to communicate, right? So this way we can group together symptoms, we see what's happening, I'm so sorry for the sound. So this way we can group symptoms together, we can study them better, we can create treatment plans, we can communicate with the managed care organizations about what we're treating, but kind of taking a step back, as I said, going back to basics, we've been gaslit from day one, to smile when we're not feeling like it, to smile for the family, to hug other people, to say hello when we don't want to not listen to our inner wisdom. And it's there. And it's just been stifled and muffled for so long. So this is why I advocate for doing less. Get to know yourselves again. What is your baseline? You may you may not even know your level of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Because because it's been 20, 30, 40 years that you have been running at this pace. And the pandemic hit, and I'll speak for myself, and I thought to myself, I was driving here and then doing this and then going there and then wait a minute, hold on. And it seemed normal, completely normal. And it is not normal. So I just want women to kind of take a step back, think about these things, get to know your body, get to know yourself as best as you can, and start from a place of self-compassion. Have some compassion towards yourself. You're not always going to get it right. We're eating and breathing this society. As soon as you walk into CVS or any store, or even open up your Facebook, it's going to tell you that you're not enough for some reason. Don't listen to that. Reconnect with yourself. That's your bottom line. Once you get a good understanding of what that is, then we start thinking about what is not your normal. Having panic attacks in the middle of a board meeting, that's not okay.
Right.
Not having movement in your life, feeling paralyzed, working in an unhealthy environment, and accepting that people violate your boundaries repeatedly, whether it's at work or at home or with peers. These are some red flags. But if you don't know what your bottom line is, you're not going to know when something is not okay. So it's just the process of self-discovery.
That's really good.
That's good.
That's good. Setting boundaries, doing less, creating a space for less, understanding self-care, the inner wisdom that you speak of, and just, getting to a place of a normal baseline to understand when to set the boundary, what's healthy for you, and how you can function on a daily basis once you do those things. So,
and recognizing it's okay.
yeah, and recognizing that it is okay.
Lady, thank you so much for joining us today. You are one of our favorites.
Yes.
I'm gonna work to be the favorite. You're gonna see. I'm gonna put it work. No, I really love it when you guys have me on. It's so inspirational to see you guys put in this work and just everything that you're doing for all of us out here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. You are an amazing clinician, and I'm sure we'll have you back.
Yes. So just keep us on the Rolodex, keep us on speed dial. Look out for us. But we're so happy to have you on. Again, a really good, passion-filled conversation, and it was like really relaxing just to be able to sit down and talk about women and about us, and empower each other.
Right, and I hope our audience really tuned in and could hear what we're saying about, treating ourselves kindly.
Yes,
as we go and navigate this world, because there's a lot going on in this world. So,
all right. Well, that concludes another episode. Again, Leidy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Danielle.
I'm Wendy, your co-host.
This is Making a Difference in Mental Health, where we're always striving to make a difference in mental health. Time.
Have a good one.